I'm Stephanie Boozer with CUGC HQ, and happy to welcome you to today's webinar with Nutanix. Going to be talking about how to unify your EUC hybrid multi-cloud deployments with Citrix and Nutanix together. And thanks for joining us today. I know that probably if you're in the United States, you're all swelteringly hot, so it's a good way to escape the heat. I'm not sure about EMEA this week, but I know we're experiencing a huge heat wave. So thanks for being with us today. Before we get started, I have a couple of announcements. Our next Exchange and Excel events are coming up in September and October. Northern California Exchange is going to be held at the Citrix headquarters in Santa Clara. So if you're in the area or you just want to travel out to the Bay Area, we'd love to have you join us. Our Exchange events are more technical deep dives, longer sessions than we typically have in our Excels. But if you love the Excels, our next one is Great Plains in Omaha. That's on October 4th. It is a full day event. Both of our events have great speakers lined up. So hopefully you can join us at one or both. And in just a minute, I'll put a link in the chat to our events calendar so you can get more information. Also, if you have not signed up to join CUGC on Slack and or Discord, I hope that you will. There's lots of great conversations happening out there. People are asking lots of great technical questions, getting help from the Citrix product management teams and other experts out there. So scan that QR code, just fill out a form. By default, you'll be in our public general channels, but if you'd like to also connect with your local CUGC group, you can indicate that and we'll get you connected with those groups because they're private. But do join us, it's a great thing. And Jarian was a key player in getting all of this set up for us. So I always like to give him a nod because he did a lot of work for us. All right, a couple other housekeeping things for you. We are recording today's session and you'll get a link to that recording tomorrow in an email from me. Also, we'd love to take your questions today as we can. So put those in the Q&A panel when you have them. We'll get to as many as we can today. And also you feel free to chat in the chat panel, talk to each other, say hello, tell us all kinds of good stuff. All right, so without further ado, I want to present Jarian Gibson. He is a staff solutions architect in EUC at Nutanix. He's also a CTP and our Kansas City Metro CUGC leader. Hello, Jarian.
Howdy.
He did not shave his head. He's
yeah, this virtual background is not agreeing with me as usual.
but we were talking beforehand, like we really like it.
Totally.
And I think this is the first time I've had you on our webinar stage, Rick. So Rick Dehlinger is Principal Solutions Architect for Strategic Alliances, and he is also a CTP alum at Citrix. So thanks for being here today, Rick.
Voila. Thanks for having me. It's been a while.
It has. And now you did a lot of blogs for us for a while, and I think they were pretty popular. So that was the last time I think I had a lot of interactions with you. So it's nice to have you on our webinar today.
Yeah, I've been hiding out in the mountains since.
All right, well, I'm going to hand things over to you guys to get going. I'm going to stop sharing this screen and I will be here if you need me. So take it away.
All right, let me go ahead and share my screen. And we should be good to go.
Yes, sir. Looking good.
All right. Well, thanks for joining us today. Rick and I will be happy to talk about unifying your EUC hybrid multi-cloud deployments with Citrix and Nutanix. We'll talk a lot about hybrid multi-cloud, focus a lot on our Nutanix Cloud Clusters offering, and talk about how Citrix can be on top of that and some updates from Citrix as well. Anything to add to that, Rick? Before I move on?
Tough to follow. Let's hit it.
All right. So why are we talking about hybrid multi-cloud with Citrix and Nutanix? We're kind of moving into a new data center type of stage where traditionally everything was, in your own data centers, in your private cloud. You might have multiple data centers, but those are all managed by you under, maybe a colo and so forth, but majority of it is managed by you and is considered private cloud. What we're seeing over, the past few years and probably even before that is that we're seeing higher multi-cloud be a thing. And, you have to look at, your own data center, maybe a service provider, maybe going to SaaS apps, maybe going to cloud native, or just looking at, changing up how you do data centers, maybe collapsing those and going all into cloud. But when you look at that new data center, looking at, how are you going to get there? What's your time to value? Things like, once I get in, is a Hotel California and I can't check out? Think about latency, think about, are my workloads easy to be portable? Any kind of integration I have, networking, security, and so forth. So looking at all those things, it is becoming a hybrid multi-cloud world. Even if you're going into all in the cloud, you're still looking at being across multiple clouds and not have all your eggs in one basket in case there is some kind of cloud outage that affects your business. So, the ideal state is hybrid multi-cloud. And today we'll talk about, how we can use Citrix running on top of Nutanix cloud clusters, or NC2 for short, how you can have a unified hybrid and multi-cloud solution, a lot of it with a single pane of glass, and be able to choose your own control plane from Citrix as well, which Rick will talk about. So think about the evolution of desktop and application delivery. It has become flexible, right? We've gotten to from, physical desktops, which yes, there might be some more high-end use cases, some use cases that require physical desktops still. But with those physical desktops, you don't have that flexibility. And you're kind of stuck to the resources of that hardware at the time you buy it. If you want to upgrade, you might have to swap some components out or go to a complete new solution with your desktops. Then we got into, the VDI world where we're centralizing everything. And this has become more flexible because we're centralizing everything. We can increase resources if we need to, as long as our underlying infrastructure has it. We scale that up to our data center capacity. If we need more, we have to extend our data center or start deploying multiple data centers. But it gives us that good centralized management, and also to be able to easily have that portability if we have that multi-data center location. But we're managing everything from top to bottom. Then we got into the DAS world, which gives us the most flexibility because we're using, cloud control planes from Citrix, and be able to run those workloads wherever we want, not have to worry about the actual control plane, but more focus on the workloads. That kind of give us the best flexibility. So you're seeing in here from physical to VDI to DAS, worst, good, best, if you go from left to right here. But also too with that DAS type of thing, and then also using the cloud as well as a resource, we kind of had that on-demand scalability by bursting into the cloud or using multiple cloud locations or multiple cloud providers to have that flexibility. So let me go ahead and give that. Oh, he still has it. So let's go ahead and hand that over to Rick here, and he'll talk about some of the Citrix things.
Yeah, so if you've been around the industry for a little while, and Jarian and I both have earned the gray hairs that you see upon our heads and our faces today over the years, you'd realize that Citrix has been behind, as a leader, has been behind a lot of the evolution in the market space. But just to spend half a second and talk to the proverbial elephant in the room. Like, if you hadn't heard from Citrix for a while, you probably had be forgiven, because we've gone through quite a bit. The company has changed and evolved dramatically over the last year and a half or so, and a big part of that has been driven by an acquisition. So we were purchased, we were taken private, we were merged with Tibco and another couple of companies. And we evolved to now become a company called the Cloud Software Group, and we're a business unit inside of the Cloud Software Group. So this all in has actually been a very positive things, for a lot of folks seeing names like and brands like NetScaler and XenServer come back has actually been a really cool flashback, cool thing to see. And the other thing that's been really cool about the change is that it's actually allowed us as Citrix, allowed us to get back to the fundamentals. And innovation is actually alive and well. That's one of the points I'll hopefully help make over the course of our session today, is that innovation is alive and well inside of Citrix. You probably haven't heard of it because most of our marketing folks and a lot of the folks we've had in the field are doing different things these days. But evolution is definitely alive and well. And one of the things that has changed is the portfolio of our solutions and the way we talk about and the way we focus those solutions. So you see here, this is just kind of a couple little snapshots in time of the different kind of focus areas and the way we positioned our technology over the years. And a lot of you perhaps have felt that in the past, Citrix may have over-rotated a little bit on the cloud, public cloud, and the move to cloud and migrations to the cloud. Well, that was good for Citrix's business and helped us transition our business and our business model to a more modern, sustainable business model. We realized that it actually put a lot of our customers in kind of an awkward position, and we're forcing our customers to do things ahead of time, ahead of schedule, and in awkward manners. So we learned our lesson along the way. And I think what you're going to see now, I'm going to spend a couple minutes talking a little bit about some of the things that we're focusing on today in our efforts to bring secure hybrid work to market. But first, I want to touch on one of the big lessons that we had learned with the cloud migrations. So, a lot of customers we heard and partners along the way that cloud, they were not ready for. We were overly aggressive. We pushed it too much and too hard. So we learned from that, backed off, adjusted both the way we're taking our stuff to market and also the way that we're organized and even how we're actually engineering and creating our new innovations. But we realized that hybrid multi-cloud really is the destination. Cloud isn't necessarily the destination. It's another option. And I brought one use case to the table here that I wanted to share today that helped kind of illustrate some of the challenge of all in on the cloud. So I've got a couple of charts here that illustrate a use case. And you could possibly consider this to be a pretty highly optimized use case based on the cost. But if a customer was to go all in on cloud, and these came from some actual numbers ran for an actual customer, and you'll see more of this out of Nutanix and Citrix in the future. We've actually got some much deeper study and analysis going into this. But in a particular use case, if you were to take and cover all the different types of usage of our virtualization technologies, and you were to run them all in a cloud. So not just your steady state workloads, but also some of your more bursty and unpredictable types of workload. If you were to run those all in on public cloud, your cost model could be somewhere, say, around $133 a user a year. Now, if you were to do that same kind of a thing, a model, and you were to buy resources, deploy them all in your own data centers that you manage on-prem, and still have enough hardware to cover all of those use cases, it could, a lot of our customers are telling us that it actually is cheaper than going in and covering all of those types of use cases in public cloud. But in digging in even more deeply, what we're finding is that a hybrid model actually can be the most cost effective by a pretty substantial margin. So if you think about it, if you take and leverage your assets that you own in your own data centers to run your steady state workloads, the things that are predictable, are going to be there, they're going to be running, what they look like and feel like. And then you run the more burstable workloads in public cloud and take advantage of the fact that you can pay by the hour, pay by the minute, and you're not paying for resources that you don't use. The hybrid type of a use case can actually bring your costs down pretty significantly. So this is just an example. I wanted to share this with you because you're going to hear some more about this out of both Citrix and Nutanix moving forward. But hybrid now for Citrix is not just a marketing tagline. It's actually a destination. As I mentioned, it's the way we're now focusing our engineering and development efforts, the way we're bringing our innovation to market, and so forth. And in support of this, I wanted to share there are a couple of assets out there that I'd suggest you go take a look at. There's a 15-minute session that Sridhar and Calvin did. That is a fantastic little video. It helps kind of paint the picture of what our strategy looks like now. But we're all in on this concept of hybrid. And hybrid to us doesn't just mean hybrid management of the infrastructure. It actually exists in a lot of different areas. So hybrid work obviously is a big part of what it is that Citrix is now focused on enabling. Hybrid networking similarly, but we also see that identity is hybrid. The workspaces and the types of apps and services people need to do their jobs are hybrid. The devices that they're using. So in many ways, this looks like an extension or feels like an extension of the any message. For those of you who've been around for a long time in this market space, may remember the any message from Citrix way back in the day. But point is, hybrid is definitely a very key focus for Citrix these days. And you're going to see us doing a lot to support that across the board in our technologies and programs that we bring to market. The beautiful thing is that meshes really, really well with what our friends at Nutanix are doing. Wouldn't you say, Jarian?
Yes, I would. So let's check the chat real quick. And let me see here, the chat and the QA. Oops, clicked forward too much. Because Rick's controlling my screen, so I can't really see that while he's presenting. So let me see. The chat here. That's just general chat. The Q&A, let's see what the Q&A has. Hey, Stefan Wright. So answer that one. From one of the early slides on the desk in Nutanix hybrid growth, do you see, other than the big three expansion like Frame and IBM Cloud? I mean, there, you have other clouds out there that are coming up, IBM Cloud, Oracle Cloud, that kind of stuff. I'm not sure how Frame fits into that question, but you're seeing other clouds come. We have our providers that we partner with, Sextera, OVH Cloud, and Equinix as well. So, you're seeing those other providers out there that can do some of these bare metal as a service offerings or other offerings in their clouds. Here you go. Here's one for you, Rick. Do you think we'll see a Citrix Cloud control plane DR between Azure and GCP now that we have a stable control plane on GCP? That's a great question.
That is a great question. Whether we're going to ultimately have control plane level failover between clouds, that I would say is a TBD, because we do need to make a choice of where we run different assets and services. That said, we have done a lot already to leverage multiple data center locations and redundancy in cloud services and so forth in order to bring high availability. So there is a lot of investment that we've made in making our technologies, very highly resilient. Whether or not we're going to actually do a control plane failover type of a scenario between the Azure and GCP control planes, and what he's referencing here is we actually can run, we've got a DAS control plane offering that runs on Google Cloud, as well as our quote unquote normal DAS control plane that runs on Azure. And in either case, it shouldn't matter where the control plane resides for the customer. It's the onus is on Citrix to make sure this stuff is up and reliable and available.
Okay. So back to Jim's, sorry, I misread your question then. Taking Nutanix cloud clusters to other cloud options. There's possibility of that. Right now, we're in AWS and Azure. And then we have our partners like Sextera and OVH Cloud and Equinix. I'm sure as other offerings get out there, the biggest thing is that we need a bare metal as a service offering. And so we had AWS first. And they had that on-chip availability to where we could just provision Nutanix directly to their bare metal nodes. And then we had Azure, which is co-developed, where we had to actually do some co-development there and have Azure-ready nodes in the data center. So, if we were to go to another cloud partner, whether it's IBM or Google or whoever, Cloud X, I'll just call it, they'll have to have some either kind of co-developed service with us or have a similar bare metal service offering like AWS have with their metal nodes to where we can just provision directly on them with not a lot of effort. So good question. Coming back to here, so what Rick was saying, what was the pricing, what he was showing, that hybrid cloud is going to save you some money. Use the resources when you need to them. Don't go all into one or the other, but kind of spread things out. And I think that also goes into the message about the question about GCP and Azure for the control planes from Citrix. You technically could have both control planes and split your workloads between them. That way you're not having all your eggs in one basket. Now, there might be some limitations of the control plane based on like the Azure stuff or the Windows multi-session stuff and how that can be brokered. But for your general workloads, you could use both control planes and split between them. That way you're kind of having your own DR between the two different control planes in Citrix. With that being said, hybrid multi-cloud is the future. It's here now. It's not only but it's going to, continue to grow as we see that. So basically, with Nutanix and Citrix right on top of Nutanix, we'll support you, where you are today and where you might go in the future. And that could be additional cloud offerings with our NC2 offering as well. So kind of taking that bridging of on-prem cloud and making that into a hybrid EUC environment. So it's reachable, right? And some of the things that'll help you easily be reachable with cloud and multi-cloud in a hybrid fashion, using that DAS control plane. We have a reference architecture guide that I'll share at the end of how easy it is to do DR with our NC2 in AWS using the Citrix DAS control plane. Let them more focused on the infrastructure pieces like your brokering, like your workspace and other pieces, and you focus more on your workloads, your applications, and your data, and having that failover between different locations pretty easily. So, and also let them manage that as well. And then going more into DR, we're seeing this trend of customers not wanting to have any more physical data centers to manage for a DR location. They are using cloud for that. And so that can help you, not having to worry about the rack and stack, the power, the cooling. If something happens in your DR data center while you're in DR, you can just use the public cloud for that DR location. And then workload portability, right? So with this offering that we're discussing today, you can easily move your workloads from your own data center into our NC2 offering in the public cloud and be able to go between multiple clouds that we support. If you don't want to be in Azure anymore, you can easily go to AWS. Don't want to be in AWS, you can easily go to Azure or be across all three without any kind of lock-in and easy way to get to move through them. So if you think about your stages of EUC, you might have your siloed brokers at first, you might have your on-prem or your customer managed control plane, and then you might have like the Citrix managed control plane, and you're having that segregated, sets of apps, desktops, data, and et cetera. And then when you go into that common broker, so the Citrix managed control plane, or with their new universal licensing that Rick will talk about, you can have the customer managed control plane to manage them both. That way you have a common set of management between your public and private clouds. And then take that a step further and adding a common platform underneath, that will give you a higher multi-cloud platform with Nutanix using our NC2 offering. So the main takeaway from here is that it's just our own hypervisor, it's AHV, and it's on bare metal nodes in the cloud. If you are using ESXi on-prem, we can do cross hypervisor replication built in, and you can go back and forth between, vSphere and AHV and our NC2, or you can move over to AHV on-prem and have the same hypervisor on both, which we have some customers do. And then you have your images, right? And being able to take those images and replicate those back using built-in replication tools, no refactoring, no reformatting. It's the same image across both without having to do a lot of investment or knowledge transfer, upscaling, or changes there. And so that takes us into workload portability, where you have that cloud control plane, and then using something like our NC2, where you have the option to pick either Azure, AWS, or both, and then combine that with your on-prem data center, where you can pick your infrastructure of the providers that we support, our own branded NX nodes, HP, Lenovo, Dell, Cisco, Fujitsu, and so forth, to be able to choose your hardware in your data center, but then pick from the 2 different node types we have in Azure, or the 7 different node types that we have in AWS. So hand that back over to Rick, and he'll talk about how this is supported on Citrix.
And you just completely stole my thunder. That's it. I'm gonna follow around. So you might be asking yourself, what is Citrix doing differently? Is this hybrid multi-cloud thing? Is this just a new marketing pitch? I got a couple of slides I'd like to share with you here to prove the point that we are taking hybrid multi-cloud very seriously. And we're taking hybrid multi-cloud with Nutanix very seriously. And one of the ways that we're doing that is by providing capital S Citrix support for NC2 in both of its flavors, current flavors, NC2 on AWS and also NC2 on Azure. And this is kind of a big deal, because there's a lot of work that goes into calling something capital S supported, meaning that you can call Citrix and you can get direct support out of Citrix on a particular offering. So we've got a slight asterisk, if you will, for the coming soon, and the support for NC2 on Azure is we're just waiting to GA the particular plugin for NC2 on Azure. But from the Citrix perspective, you can call in today and get support on it as it sits. Now, another big thing that we've done in support of our customers and given them the ability to run their workloads in hybrid cloud, multi-cloud types of scenarios is the introduction of this thing that we're calling the Citrix Universal Subscription. So what we had done in past lives, we put some artificial restrictions you could consider on what control planes customers could run, where they could run their workloads. And it was essentially designed to try and help customers decide to go and run their workloads in the cloud and consume our Citrix managed control plane. So what the Universal Subscription does actually rolls that old policy back. You can now run whatever control plane you'd like, whether it's CVAD, LTSR, or CR in a control plane that you manage yourself, or whether you leverage the Citrix DAS, our cloud managed Citrix managed control plane. Either of those control planes are first-class citizens. You can even run a customer managed control plane on a public cloud, and that's a supported scenario where it was not in the past. So in addition to that, the Universal Subscription gives customers the ability to run their workloads wherever they would like. So that restriction that was in place in the past, where you could only run them in specific places, depending on whether it was customer managed or DAS control plane, that is now gone. So ultimately, this supports the hybrid multi-cloud scenario, and it shows our willingness to double down and put some wood behind the customer choice value proposition. So this, on top of some of the normal flexibility that you've got, gives you as the customer the ability to choose the right technologies at the right layer of the stack to support your business needs and the evolution of your business. So that can be, the choice of your access layer, whether you're running storefront and managing it yourselves, whether you're running workspace as your UI. I already talked about the control plane, the management layer, the type of workload, or where you choose to host it. Now, another example of what we're doing to help support hybrid multi-cloud scenarios. In the past, we've developed and brought some capabilities to the DAS, to our cloud managed control plane first. And we had them there only exclusively. So in the past, again, that forced customers into an either or and was artificially pushing them towards the cloud. So Web Studio is one of those technologies that we developed. I'm getting sidetracked. I'm looking at the question that came in and I'm dying to answer the question. So let me pause on that and answer the question so I can get back on track. So Stefan asked, Citrix Universal, give us a use case. Okay, here's a use case for you. Customer, say in an industry that was highly regulated, has been a Citrix customer for a while. They've got their own Citrix managed control plane that's been running in their own data center for a number of years. And say they decided that they wanted to run some of their VDAs, provision the VDA workload up into a public cloud, say Google Cloud. So in the past, without Universal, the customer would have needed to have purchased a subscription or hybrid rights in order to actually deploy the workload onto Google Cloud. And they would have had to have used the Citrix Cloud control plane versus their own customer managed. Now with a current subscription license, they have the option, they could take the entire thing and shift it up to, say, the entire control plane, all their managed components and everything even, and shift those up to, say, NC2 on AWS. So we give that customer now the ability to run those workloads wherever and run whichever control plane they want, wherever, right? So they could even lift and shift a control plane. Thank you for the question, Stephen. All right, so going back, Web Studio is a technology that we had developed and was only available for a long time in the DAS control plane. This is now coming to, or is now available, I should say, for customer managed control plane. And you may think, oh, gee, what's the big deal here? Well, part of the big deal here, besides the new look and feel and the streamlined user experience, the other part of the big deal is that in order to have this UI, you also have to have the RESTful APIs available. So this opens up a whole new range of automation capabilities, leveraging REST APIs that customers have wanted to do for quite some time. And it also brings the continuity between the two environments. Another example of another piece that we've pulled over, besides Web Studio stuff, whoops, that's just going to show the demo of it. So there's one other core technology that was developed for public cloud that we're now bringing back for our CVAD types of deployments, and that's the autoscale service. So the autoscale service, its goal really is to help try and balance the cost of your compute infrastructure with the user experience. So its job is to dynamically power on or schedule-based power manage VDAs. So you've got enough capacity that's available there for the customers, your customers when they come onto the system. But you're not paying for extra capacity that you're not needing. So bringing the autoscale into the CVAD and making it available for our on-prem customers, we now have both the power management, the dynamic provisioning, and also the vertical load balancing capabilities that autoscale enabled are now available for our customers with their own customer managed control planes as well. So two big examples of two key capabilities that we're bringing forward. Now another, and I'm gonna shift here and additionally try and make a case here that innovation is alive and well inside of Citrix and that we're looking at things very differently. So secure private access, for those of you that haven't followed secure private access.
Oh, what happened?
Did PowerPoint blow up on you?
Yeah, I think PowerPoint, give me 1 second. Sorry about that. I think PowerPoint just said nope.
No worries. I'll let you bring it back up. So secure private access is our solution for the delivery of web-based applications and SaaS-based applications, right? So we recognize that not everything is web-based, is Windows applications. And it doesn't make sense to virtualize every application. Some apps, such as web and SaaS-based applications, when all they really need is the proper networking and identity and authentication, those technologies, or those applications can be deployed in a more lightweight manner, and they've got some different requirements for them. So secure private access is our way of very effectively delivering web-based and SaaS-based applications using a zero trust network access type of a theology and approach. So SPA brings your web applications into the Citrix Workspace UI, whether you're using Storefront, or whether you're using Workspace Service or the native app. And previously, it was also only available as a managed service, but is now available for our on-prem customers. So one other point I'll make here is an illustration that Citrix is not the same that it used to be. For years, and back in my CTP days and my multi-tenant days, where I was a contractor building multi-tenant platforms and systems, we were always hammering Citrix on, we need to get the Citrix brand out of the way. You're actually, when things go wrong, you end up with a bad reputation. Well, with the app personalization service that fits into a much broader service managed picture, the app personalization service, you can actually now do that. You can actually take the Workspace app, get the Citrix logo out of the way, and insert your own logos and brandings into it. So it's another sign, if you will, that it's not the same old Citrix, but it is the same old Citrix. Some of those things are rolling back. And the last point I'm going to make here, and you're going to notice here that I'm pulling up something, this slide that's from Q4 of 2022. I just want to make the point that innovation is alive and well inside of Citrix. So I'm not going to talk to all of these individual changes here, but we're on a pretty well regimented quarterly release cadence now for our package technologies. And those, of course, are continuous for the DAS platforms. But this is just a list only of new features and capabilities for the Workspace app, only for Q4 of 2022. And I'm not going to touch on all of these, but my point is, this is a substantial list. There's a heck of a lot going on. And if I fast forward to the 1 quarter, 2 quarters, I should say, further ahead, and even recognizing that I skipped a quarter with the slides that I'm showing you here, I just want to point out the breadth of enhancements and capabilities that we're bringing to the table now. I would charge that Citrix is actually innovating at a pace unprecedented. Like, we're doing more faster and better quality today than we've ever delivered as a company. And hopefully you as our customers feel that.
Let's take some questions here real quick. Let me see here. You already answered that one about the use case. From Jim Smith here, with Universal, is this also including splitting resources? For example, would run a self-hosted control plane on premises or cloud self-hosted while being able to leverage license server and web service in cloud? And correct me if I'm wrong, but I believe that was part of the beauty of Universal, is that you could pick and choose which cloud services you wanted and which customer managed services you wanted to run.
Yes. And we've also done a lot of work, for example, to allow you to bring customer managed farms, Citrix farms, into the Workspace UI and vice versa. Take DAS managed farms and bring them into Storefront. So there is a lot of that cross-pollination that can happen. You can pick and choose between the two.
And then Web Studio is same as on-prem. Yep. pretty much it is the same. You might see things come first in Web Studio, but then they'll trickle down to on-prem in the next quarterly release.
Yes, the authentication experience might be slightly different, right? You may have a drop-down dialog for a domain when you log into to on-prem where you don't, but past that, yeah, what you're going to see and feel is consistent between the two.
And then branding, we'll cover the URL also, and I believe the vanity URL stuff is already live on DAS, correct?
I think it is.
Yeah.
We've got quite a bit more coming. There's some substantial enhancements coming to the Workspace UI service.
And then here's what probably for me, any discussion on bringing Windows 11 multi-session and HCI. I can tell you right now, that's all up to Microsoft and what they'll allow. Right now, they only allow that on Azure Stack HCI. I believe it's more of a licensing, not licensing, more of a EULA type thing with Microsoft, not a technical one. So, you know, if that's something you want, talk to Microsoft reps, because the more people asking for it, hopefully that will help, grease the wheels to get that moving to outside of Azure and Azure Stack HCI. So good question there.
Yes, please be as loud as you can about your asks there, because there are some artificial limitations that Microsoft has put in play to kind of control the way they take things to market. That would be a heck of a bonus to get overturned.
Looks like we have one more coming in before that. Do you see on-prem SPA as an alternative to NetScaler for SSL VPN replacements? Ooh, that's a good question.
I would see SPA essentially as the next step in the next evolution. You can leverage your NetScaler assets and investments, right? So for on-prem, you actually do leverage the NetScaler appliance for SPA. So I would see it as kind of the next step. So SPA takes and adds on top of what we used to do with an SSL VPN.
Yep.
And adds a bunch of additional capabilities and content controls and analytics and reporting, and even the user experience is quite a bit different and improved.
Yep, well said. Yeah. So looking here at this next slide here, so Citrix plus Nutanix is going to be your platform for hybrid multi-cloud. So taking those Citrix control plane options, whether you're going to use the cloud control plane, the customer managed control plane, or I should say Citrix managed control plane or customer managed control plane, because you can run them anywhere. And then taking those services that you want and run those on top of Nutanix, to whether you're in your data center with the hypervisor that we support, or extending that out into the cloud with our NC2 offering in Azure and AWS today. So that's what's going to bring you into that true hybrid multi-cloud architecture, being able to have license portability. So you already have the universal licensing from Citrix to run where you want and which control plane you want to use. With our licenses, those are portable as well. So you can take your licenses from on-prem, using our capacity-based licensing, our per user EUC licensing, or using the cloud options as well, but they're not locked in. Those move from cloud to cloud. You're going to deploy these things in your cloud accounts. So you'll bring your AWS account or your Azure accounts, deploy in your cloud resources, use our control plane to deploy those into that, but everything is all done inside of your cloud accounts. And then migration as well. So it's just AHV, right? The one thing to take away from this, whether it's on-prem Nutanix or Nutanix on cloud clusters in the cloud, is that it's just AHV. It's the same pane of glass. It's basically the same exact thing, just, whose data center you're running in and which type of bare metal hardware you're running on, and so forth. And so you're going to have that unified platform using your consistent contracts and skill sets, because you're seeing basically our interfaces, whether you're on-prem, whether you're in Azure or AWS, it's the exact same pane of glass. The main thing underneath is the cloud networking. But once you have that up and running, ready to go, everything else is managed through our portal for clusters and through our admin interfaces like Prism and Prism Central. So you can have it on your terms. So run your workloads anywhere, right? In your private cloud, in AWS, in Azure, or anywhere else we go into the future. But again, it's the exact same thing. No vendor lock-in. You're portable. You want to be on-prem today. You want to go to AWS tomorrow. That's fine. AWS is not working for you. You want to go to Azure. That's fine. You want to come back on-prem. That's fine also. You want to run across all three. that's all fine as well, is the main thing with this slide here. And then consistency, that I said, right? So basically it's our AOS, so our platform underneath. So whether you're using, vSphere or Hyper-V or AHV, AOS is the platform with the hypervisor on top, whether that's the one or the three I talked about. But then when you go to clusters on AWS or Azure, that's going to be AHV in those locations. We own it. We can do all the stuff we want to, and that's why it's AHV only. But with that, it's all Prism, right? So you're getting the same thing, whether you're using our replication capabilities, our migration tools, all those type of things. It's all the same consistency across multiple clouds. Again, bring your cloud accounts, have your networking set up in AWS or Azure, and then deploy those clusters into your resource locations and regions. And then some of the highlights here, what you can do with this. So a couple of things here, some good ones that help you out. Just in time, shrink and scale, and on demand, scale up or scale down. So just like our clusters in your data center, you start with 3 nodes, and then you can scale up the cluster size and shrink that down as you need it. So for example, you may start off small, and then you have a bursting use case and you need more resources. Well, you can grow that cluster up to the size that's supported in those different cloud providers. Auto host remediation, if there's an issue, it's going to bring a new node into the cluster, automatically eject the bad node, and you're still up and running. You have our cost visibility and governance as well to kind of compare costs, see where things are going. Possibly one cloud could be better cost efficient than the other. And then DR cost optimizations as well, and hibernate and resume. So DR, instead of having a full DR build out, you can start off with a pilot light cluster, or you can back up to one of our third-party backup providers, back up there in the cloud, bring your cluster up, and then restore that when you need to go in a DR event. And then hibernate and resume. So in AWS, we allow you to hibernate the cluster, which basically releases the nodes, backs it up to S3 in AWS, and you're only being charged for the minimal storage cost when you don't need the compute cost. When you need those compute costs, you resume the cluster, and then it restores that back from S3. You're back up and running where you left off. And procure in minutes, right? So once you get into our portal, you can get a trial. I'll have information at the end of this for that. Add your cloud accounts, and you can basically up and running on that trial using AWS or Azure, and then based on which cloud you're up within hours with a cluster, depending on which cloud you choose. And then global expansion. So basically we support a number of regions I'll show you here shortly, and a number of locations within those regions. And so that way you can expand out. Maybe you're in retail where you want locations closer to the stores, but instead of putting physical resources in those stores, you use the closest cloud location that we support and have those running there. We've had some customers with those conversations to do that, to have more localized availability of resources without actually having to make a physical investment in location for that. So just in time, expansion, scale, and shrink. So what we have is Prism. In our Prism Central, we have what's called playbooks, or Prism Pro or XPlay, and what you can do. And a fellow teammate, Dwayne, has some pretty cool things out there he's done where you can do like kind of these playbooks to set up and say, look, the cluster hits certain capacity. I need to start provisioning more nodes in that cluster. Or I've hit a certain low threshold. I need to start shrinking that cluster on demand based on cluster resources. Also too, even the user VMs, you can do this with also, to where you're hitting a certain CPU threshold on those user VMs. So I want to maybe add more vCPU, and then I hit a low threshold, bring that back down. So this is all built into our playbooks inside of Prism Central that works both on-prem and in our NC2 offering as well. And auto host remediation. So from our portal for clusters, it's going to do health monitoring, detect failures. It's going to basically replace those unhealthy hosts. And so that's all done for you in the background. Again, it brings a new node in first, gets that into the cluster, and then ejects that bad node. So you're not having any problems with your capacity resources while it's fixing that issue. And then think about your DR, right? We call this elastic DR. So think about your standard DR, where you're basically building out a complete physical location to mirror your production data center. And you can do that. And we have customers that do that. And this is all based on your recovery time objective, how fast you want to be in DR and your requirements. But you can also have elastic DR as well, where we have customers who put out a pilot-like cluster of the minimum amount of nodes they need for storage. And we do have storage heavy nodes that you can pick as an option to replicate to as a target. And then once they go into a DR mode, they can go ahead and expand that to the cluster or spin up multiple clusters to cover that DR event. And like I previously said too, you can also replicate or back up to our third-party backup providers, and they have cloud location or cloud backup as well. And then you can also restore from that, again, all based on your recovery time objectives for DR. And then hibernation, this is the big one. I briefly mentioned this. What hibernation does is it allows you to not incur compute costs when you don't need those physical nodes to run, and only incur the minimal storage cost. And then when you need those nodes again, you resume the cluster, those get restored back to it, and you're back up and running again, and you're saving some cost there. And so we also improved that resume and hibernate time as well from what it was to have a 3x speed improvement for that. The next one is going to be heterogeneous clusters, so mixed node clusters, right? And this is in AWS. So for example, we have the i3EN node, which are storage heavy nodes. And I mentioned for DR, having that minimal DR pilot-like cluster for footprint, use those i3EN storage heavy clusters. And then when you actually go into a DR mode and you don't need the storage heavy, but you need more compute, add the i3 nodes as well, which are also a little bit cheaper per hour than the i3EN nodes. So you kind of have that mix, and we support that with i3EN and i3, or you can do the Z1D and the M5D nodes as well for that. And we have customers doing that for some DR type scenarios. We have a question. Yes, Hibernate and Resume currently is only on AWS, so stay tuned for that coming in the future for other clouds that we support. And then cost intelligence, right? So this is what's our cost governance. If you're a Nutanix customer, this was formerly known as Beam. And so this can give you unified cost visibility, not only on your private cloud Nutanix, but also on NC2 or even cloud native as well. So you kind of get that unified cost visibility. And then you have things like chargeback and budgeting if you have certain departments that pay for their own their own resources. And then you also helps you with cost savings and optimizations as well. And then what about visibility, right? So with AWS, we support 29 regions, 7 bare metal types. We just added 2 more. And then you see that we can support up to 28 node clusters. When we first released AWS, it was 16 nodes, then it was 21, and now it's 28. And then look at Azure, which we're currently adding more and more. Right now, it's 6 regions, 2 bare metal node types. And then we just recently started supporting 28 node clusters. When we first released Azure and announced it back in October, November of last year, it was 13 node clusters. You could do 16, which we did in our testing for our team for validation testing. But now in the portal, you can do 28 node clusters in the portal now for that. And then if there's a region that you need that we don't support, we have our bare metal as a service partners out there, OVH Cloud, Cyxtera, and Equinix as well. So you see, we do have that global footprint, and we're increasing that as Microsoft adds locations, as AWS, and so forth. And then the node types are subject to what's available in those regions as well. In Azure, we also have a GPU node type with T4s. So AWS. So if you have a GPU workloads in AWS, we have a node with 8 T4s on it. And that's why it's up. That's funny. So your question here, are GPU options also for compute nodes on the Breaking Cloud silo side? So we do have the GPU options, and it looks like you can do that in AWS, but nothing today in Azure. So stay tuned for more options going forward further. Let me go back to here. And so also too, we are in the marketplace for Azure. So we do provide all the benefits of being in that marketplace. Also too, you get your hybrid benefits with Azure as well. And the extended security updates apply as well. So when you have the OS like Windows 7, Server 2012 R2, all those things apply with Azure when using NC2. And so you can apply all your same things to the marketplace that you have today, use your minimum cloud spend, that kind of stuff. It's all done through the Azure marketplace with Azure. As far as licensing, you pay us for the software because it's our software running on top of these bare metal nodes in the cloud, and then you pay the cloud provider for their bare metal instance, and that basically goes on whatever kind of agreement you have with that cloud provider and so forth. how that breaks out is that we have a couple ones, different licensing models for our software. Are you clicking here? Okay, go. So we have bring your own licensing. So if you have like capacity-based licensing or our per user VDI licensing, the ultimate tier of that, you can actually have those licenses flexible between, you know, those different on demand and the cloud. Or you can pay for cloud commit, which is a yearly upfront, or on demand pay as you go, which is a monthly one. So you kind of mix those two as well. So like, remember I talked about that, the Pilot Lite nodes, maybe have those, you know, that the minimal nodes as cloud commits, but then when you burst into DR for those extra nodes, maybe go with those as pay as you go when you need them and only incur those costs. Or you can just bring your own licensing if you're CVL or the VDI licensing today. Some more breakdown here of consumption models. So yeah, I told you about our three that were for Nutanix software. You can also go through the Microsoft Azure Marketplace for pay-as-you-go and cloud commit as well. And then you have our cloud hardware options, on-demand, reserved, convertible for AWS, and then on-demand and reserved for Azure. As far as licensing, so we do offer a per-user licensing model for this as well from Nutanix. So typically with this, you're going to match your broker licensing, so that's Citrix DAS or the customer managed control plane. And those licenses are portable across on-prem and the multiple clouds as long as you are our ultimate tier. So our licensing, we have starter, pro, and ultimate. And for the EUC to be portable across multi-cloud with public cloud usage, you have to be on the ultimate tier. The nice thing is this works for, you know, if you want to have, you know, time zone work shifts. Basically, it doesn't matter what size the cluster is. You're just licensing this for the amount of users that run on the cluster. So again, match your broker licensing. And this gives you a disaster recovery across on-prem and public cloud as well. Also note that with this licensing, the cluster is dedicated for your EUC workloads, so your Citrix workloads, and the core supporting infrastructure for that as well. So it also requires Prism Central for the licensing. So Prism Central, you know, things like your cloud connectors. It does include files also for your profile and user data storage. All those different pieces for Citrix that you need for infrastructure, that's all covered under this as well. The use cases here, our two biggest ones are DR and bursting, are the two biggest ones we've seen with customers. You know, again, get out of managing data centers for DR, but also too, when you have those times where you have to have an influx of users that need resources and you can't get that kit in your data center quickly, you can use the cloud as a destination for that to cover that capacity for you and then spin that down when that demand for capacity is no longer there. Rapid scale, again, get, you know, increase capacity pretty quickly without having to do a lot of work. And then we have like things like test and dev and migration to where maybe you want to test a new version of Citrix, have a test environment, migrate between different hypervisors as well, you know, move that to the cloud, go to AHV, and then once you flip your hypervisor on-prem to AHV, move that back from the cloud as well. So all that flexibility with that. And then integration. So we have our typical integrations with Citrix on here. So if you're going to run our hypervisor, which you have to run with NZ2, you're going to have that integration for things in Studio, the hosting connection, power management, full clone wizard, MCS, director for the VM level storage statistics, the DAS, so integration and deployment of the cloud connectors, and then also if you want to use PVS as well. And yes, we fully do support PVS on NC2 in the cloud, and it's the same exact way with PVS on-prem, where you can just take your vDisk images and copy those over and stand up PVS on top of cloud clusters. Come on, click here. So what does that look like? So we are Citrix ready. We are supported by Citrix, which Rick mentioned earlier. If you're on AWS, it's the exact same plugins as you're running your data center today for AHV. If you're going to Azure, it's going to be a new Prism Central based plugin, which is going to be GA here pretty soon. And that basically takes advantage of our Prism Central, the virtual private networking, the VPC networking, the overlay networking, and allows you to use our new templates functionality, which allows you to replicate across multiple clusters built in without having to do a lot of work. As far as like, you know, rapid scale, we did a demo video that I did that shows you how to burst 2,000 desktops in under 2 hours to AWS. What this video shows is I go through and I have a cluster on-prem. I've got a VPC already set up in AWS. VPN connectivity is already there. I go into our cloud clusters portal. I deploy a 16 node cluster. Once that's up, I set up do the first time wizard setup for the cluster. I set up our replication targets, replicate a base image over to that for Windows 10. And then I spin up 2,000 desktops using MCS on that cluster. And that's all done in under 2 hours. And that shows you how fast that time to value is once you get up and running with cloud clusters in the cloud. Again, Rick mentioned the licensing, universal or the on-prem term licensing, both apply to this. So you can use both. The main difference here is that on-prem term is that it's customer managed control plane only, but it's flexible now to where you can run this on NC2 or in the cloud and still manage it, where universal gives you the option to run either control plane or a mixture of components in the control plane. Anything you want to add, Rick, before I move on?
Money.
All right. Almost done here. So if you want to look at the comparison between Azure and AWS, which I did fix this slide, it's 28 in both. There's 7 in AWS, 2 in Azure. It was a jointly engineered solution between Microsoft and Nutanix for Azure. AWS, we went with their bare metal service. We have mixed node types in GPU in AWS. It's not there in Azure yet. You can use Flow and Prism Central as an option. AWS is actually required in Azure. AWS Marketplace is coming. Azure, it's already there. GovCloud is there in AWS. It's not there yet in Azure. Our files offering that we have for your profiles and your data storage and so forth, they're both available in both. Hibernation is GA in AWS. It's not there yet in Azure. And then as far as our integration with AHV, it's the same one as on-prem AHV, our PE plugin, and then Azure is our PC-based plugin, which will be GA soon. So the main thing here when doing the hybrid multi-cloud with Nutanix and Citrix is that, time to cloud matters. So think about your cloud migration. Again, if you're already a Nutanix customer on-prem, you're already running ESXi or AHV, you're already pretty much good to go. ESXi, cross hypervisor replication, AHV, it's the exact same on both. And so once you have that networking piece in your cloud tenants good to go, you just deploy and you're up and running. So you're actually that time to value is pretty quick with NC2 and Citrix for those use cases that we talked about. Efficiency, the biggest thing here is that you're getting full bare metal nodes, right? So you're not getting any kind of t-shirt size or splice of hardware. You're getting a full bare metal node, dual 25 gig plus networking, NVMe back storage, all the memory, the full processors in there. So you have complete custom, I can't talk. You're able to fully customize your workload, your VMs on there to what you want to do. Whereas in the cloud, you're getting t-shirt sizes, right? You're starting off with 2x4 and maybe you need 2x8, but to get that, you have to go to the next t-shirt size or you may not be using all those resources and you're paying for that without having to use them. And then think about, making sure you have the proper storage tier on your VMs when you're cloud native and your throughput and so forth. Again, in ours, you're getting full NVMe back storage. You're getting 25 gig plus networking. You're not having to worry about that storage performance or the throughput of those nodes based on the slices in the cloud. And so, with Citrix and Nutanix, it's possible, right? So you can build this out in your hybrid multi-cloud in hours. You can manage all the clouds as one, a similar construct across with our Prism and Prism Central. Your DR, you're up and running pretty quickly. I'll share a DR reference architecture with AWS we did that we show the RTO times for that. We show MCS, PVS, how long it took us up and running. And again, that was in hours and not days. Go to the cloud without having to change anything because again, it's just your VM moving from on-prem into our hypervisor in the cloud with NC2. Think about your cost savings. And again, we talk about licensing, same software, same licensing. It's all the same thing. So for, reaching hybrid multi-cloud, cloud management with the DAS control plane or universal licensing, use cloud clusters for DR, and then have that fully portable workload across on-prem and multiple clouds that we support today and whatever we add into the future. So your takeaways here, hybrid multi-cloud, it's not evil. It isn't necessarily the destination, but the destination, like we were talking about, is hybrid, right? We are living in a hybrid multi-cloud world. The Nutanix Cloud Platform is that one hybrid multi-cloud platform to run Citrix on top of. And then you see how Citrix and Nutanix are working closely together. Rick and I actually talk pretty much every other week, if not weekly, and we have bi-weekly engineering calls to make sure that our relationship is the best going forward, and we're able to improve on what we have today and do some things possibly that you won't be able to do on other platforms in the future. And that's, I'll stop talking because I slip sometimes. If you want some more resources, the first one is a test drive, right? We have a test drive out there on our website, so you don't have to actually incur any kind of cloud cost or anything. You actually do a click-through test drive of the 2000 bursting demo I talked about on AWS. So you go up, you use the email, it's a click-through, so all the interfaces, see what we went through, see the cloud console, see Prism, everything that we did to actually burst those 2000 desktops. You can click through that completely on that test drive. The next one, assets here. We do have a validated design. So this is Citrix Blessed. They reviewed it, they blessed it. So it's a joint validated design we have out there. This supports your on-prem solution. Also allows you to extend into NC2 with AWS right now. We'll be adding Azure in the future for hybrid multi-cloud, but right now it's just hybrid multi-cloud with on-prem and AWS. So stay tuned for Azure coming in the future months. And then we also have reference architecture guides. So we have one today out there for AWS using the i3 metal nodes. And it's going to show you both Windows Server and Windows Desktops, MCS and PVS. And we are going to be updating this soon with the new i4i metal nodes as well, because those are Ice Lake nodes with a terabyte of RAM and better processors than the i3 metal nodes. So we'll show capacity and scalability and performance on those ones. We also have Azure, and the first two for Azure are out. That's MCS with the Windows Server or Windows Desktops. And we'll have PVS here in the near future as well. PVS does work today, but we have some work to do for the integration for the plugin, because we are moving from a Prism Element plugin that we have today on-prem to a Prism Central-based plugin. And so we have to do some engineering together for the setup wizard for PVS. That's all we have, but if you want to test drive, you can go ahead and take a test drive. Here's the links here. So I'll pause here for a second for these two links. NC2, so Nutanix.com, NC2. And then if you want to do the test drive, Nutanix.com/cloudtd. And then the best thing here is that you want to do a free trial. You can do a 30-day free trial, either on AWS or Azure. So if you want to test this out in your cloud accounts, the only thing it's going to cost you is your cloud consumption. But as far as from Nutanix software, that's going to be included in that 30-day trial. So learn more about that. And with that, we're only a few minutes over, but thank you today. Any closing thoughts, Rick, while I check the chat?
Well, I hope that everyone that attended this came away with a good, confident feeling that Citrix and Nutanix are as close as we've ever been. We're doing some great work together, and we're both completely embracing this hybrid multi-cloud scenario. So we see it's a lot of folks' realities today, and a lot of folks' destinations in the near future too.
And with that, thank you to join us today. Thank you, Rick. We'll hand that back over to Stephanie. So I'll stop sharing and hand it back over to Stephanie.
All right, so I learned a new word today. Customizing. I love it.
I get going, and sometimes my words start combining together, and I gotta just slow right down again. So
your brain just works too fast. Thank you so much. I appreciate you being here today. It was a lot of great information. So I know that people are probably going to revisit it, and you'll get that recording link tomorrow, so you'll be able to do that. And I'll share those links in the follow-up email as well that Jarian shared at the end. And I guess with that, I'll let you all get back to your day. Thanks, Rick. Thanks, Jarian. Glad you were here today.
Thank you. Oh, we have a QA real quick. Hold on. What's in the QA? Oh, thank you, Christian. He says, thank you, Rick and Jarian. Thank you, Christian. Have a good day.
Yeah, appreciate it, gang.
All right. Bye.
All right, everyone. Enjoy the rest of your summer. We'll see you at another CUGC event here soon, hopefully. Take care. Bye.
See you.